Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening for the Women's Voices for Social Justice monthly education meeting. Typically, our education meetings begin for the kind of the school year almost in September and go on through May. This is anything but a typical year. So in a conference call in June, we decided a couple of things. One, our excellent program chair, Nancy Nix Rice, proposed that we start early because there are so many pressing topics that are urgent and for people to learn about and think about and should not wait till September. And also that for the time being, our meetings will be virtual. So this is our second virtual meeting. And from what we understand, there's great attendance, which we really appreciate. And we assume that you will be well rewarded for your attention tonight to the two speakers, and that you'll continue to join us virtually for as long as we have to do this. I just want to announce a couple of upcoming events. So on Thursday, September 10th, will be our next education meeting. And the title of that is Bringing the Ballot to You, Voting in a Pandemic and Beyond. So we all know the urgency of that. On Tuesday, September 15th, at noon, there's a lunch and learn, and Chris Kraymeyer, who is the CEO of Beyond Housing, will be talking about affordable housing, which it has recently become a real priority for Women's Voices and for the Racial Justice Committee of Women's Voices. And on Thursday, September 17th at 6:15, the Racial Justice Committee is having its book club called, and the topic is One Person, No Vote, How Voter Suppression Destroys Our Democracy. So I hope you will plan to join us for as many of those as possible. And with that, I will turn the program over to Ruth Erisman, the other co-president.
Thank you, Susan. Good evening, everybody. I am Ruth Erisman, and it's my privilege this evening to introduce our speakers. Before we begin, I wanted to share just a little information from two sources of data around gun violence and the police that give context to our discussion this evening. After the death of Michael Brown, the Washington Post undertook a study that showed that the FBI underestimated the number of police shootings by half. Another collaborative research effort called Mapping Police Violence offers two very sobering facts. The first is that the rate of violent crime doesn't make it more or less likely for police to kill people. And the second, from that same website, which compares the 100 largest cities. Of those 100 cities, the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department has the highest rate of police killings of any city at 17.9 per million people. The 100 city average is only 4.6 per million. So it's my honor to introduce this evening's speaker. The number of individuals who are participating this evening, we think over 200, is an indication of the interest in this concept of public safety for all of us. What are the policies and the practices that contribute to public safety for all of us? Tonight, we'll hear from two individuals who are committed to taking steps to reimagine what true public safety looks like and to make that a reality. First, we have Jamala Rogers. Jamala Rogers is an acclaimed activist and the author of 2 books and a regular contributor to the St. Louis American. With John Chasnoff, she is currently the co-chair of the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression, and was a leader in creating a civilian oversight board of the police in the city of St. Louis. Jamala Rogers also helped found the Organization for Black Struggle and is the current executive director. It's been my privilege to learn from her and work with her in a variety of ways over these past decades. Wesley Bell, our second speaker, emerged as a leader during the protests over the death of Michael Brown. He won a landslide election in 2018 to defeat incumbent Robert McCullough and become the first African American to hold the position of prosecuting attorney in St. Louis County. A native of North St. Louis County, Prosecutor Bell has a breadth of experience as a public defender, defense attorney, judge, and professor of law. His goals include ending mass incarceration, eliminating debtor prison practices, and rebuilding trust between the prosecutor's office and the community. So Jamala Rogers will be our first speaker, and she's going to share some slides with us. We'll share her screen. We will be taking questions at the end of both presentations. You can submit questions to us using the chat function on your at the bottom of your screen, and we will field those questions and route them to the appropriate speaker after their presentations. So Jamala.
So thank you for that introduction, and really thank you for the invitation to speak on public safety, because it's an issue now that has come front and center with the whole defund the police. About 3 years ago, the Coalition Against Police Crime and Repression kicked off a Reimagining public safety, and we went across the city and the county to talk about the failed arrest and incarceration model that both the city and the county were using, that was not resulting in, first of all, the diminish of crime or the feeling of public safety from the residents. And so we began to look at the budgets, because that's where everything emanates from. And so we looked at all of the money that gets spent on arrest and incarceration, which includes the courts. And then we looked at, what's being spent on human development services. And so, as you can imagine, there's a wide disparity in that. And so our campaign was really to have voters and residents look at that gap and what would happen if we took a fraction of that city revenue that was going toward arrest and incarceration and really investing in that, investing in jobs, investing in community centers, investing in home ownership, what that would look like in terms of the reduction of crime. And so I'm going to share one of the slide presentations that we often give. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I'm going to pick key slides to share with you. And so let's make sure that this happens fairly painlessly. Can you all see a screen?
No.
Okay, so we're gonna do something different here. Okay, I mean, nothing is happening. Okay, maybe something's getting ready to happen now.
There.
It is.
Okay, so as I was saying, you all are going to be looking at a few slides, a few ones that I think are very poignant and informative, and I hope that are you still seeing it?
See, yes, we see it.
Okay, so I'm going to start at like reinvesting public safety, because that's what we named it. Eventually, we began to talk about not just reinvesting, but divesting and investing. And so, because first, if you have a finite pot of money, then the first cry is going to be, well, we don't have enough money for all of that. So we begin to look at what it would mean specifically to take money from the police department, where a lot of the money goes with not a whole lot of success in terms of, like I said, people feeling safer and also any reduction in crime. So I'm gonna move us, I talked about the arrest incarceration, which is a model that we've used for the last 30 years that has not worked. So this is an interesting one, because as we look at, for example, defunding the police, and of course with George Floyd, that became a rallying cry for most cities, particularly those who, like St. Louis, we had already looked at the police budget and it's way bloated. And you often hear the police chief and the public safety director talk about, we need more police, we need more police. This is a statistic that I hope will lay with people and be able to actually repeat it to folks who say we need more police. Right now, St. Louis is the highest policed city in the country. It's the 11th highest. So that means we have like 37.1 police officers per 10,000 people. That is a lot of police. And so when we talk about, that's minus the 100 or so that, the city is always claiming they need to hire more of. So you got 1,185 officers and making St. Louis the 11th highest police city in America. And that's even given the demographics and the size of the city. So if we did City Hall's public safety plan, we would actually rank 6th nationally if they added the number of officers that they would like to put on the force. And right now there is a battle around not public safety, but the residency requirement. For many years, voters and residents of St. Louis have said we want our officers to live in the city. And now there's a big push from no less from Governor Parton, who doesn't even live here, to say, yes, police have the right to live wherever they want to, when that is completely against the request of our citizens. So here we have our budget. It's probably a little bit more than that, but this year we definitely had a deficit based on COVID-19. But you can see that 52% of the budget is going towards the arrest and incarceration model. Again, when I talked about out of balance priorities, you have health and human services, which deals with youth and family services, veteran affairs, homelessness, unhoused people. 0.6% of that is what's used out of the 2016 general budget. And we're going to try to get these numbers updated because it's probably a bigger gap than this, while we still spend all of this money for incarceration. Again, Prop P, which people thought was a really good deal because that's the way it was framed. Most of that money went to the police. Very few of it went to crime prevention, which is what, we were told it would go to: recreation programs, social and mental health programming, building demolition. But as you can see, a great deal of that went to the police department. So every time something happens, most of the money somehow gets funneled to the police department. And even the latest issue around privatization of the police, right off the top, police are going to get 30% of that $1 billion lease. And so we're going to be opposed to that, and are opposed to that. And we beat it back for now, but we know we'll come back later. So when we think about public safety, most people think about crime, but really it's how do people feel in their community, how they feel about their neighbors, how do they feel about response to the police, how do they feel about the institutions there that are going to support families. And so one of the things that we realize is that we do not have a proactive way of looking at crime. It's mostly reactive. And even in terms of the chief's thing about the triangle, that's proven ineffective. But what we really need is, violence prevention and a holistic public safety that really takes a look at how racism impacts these neighborhoods, how poverty impacts these neighborhoods, and how can we get to the roots of that. I'm going to move us ahead because one of the things that you'll probably hear from Prosecutor Bell is our thing is in order to reduce poverty-based criminalization, you have to end the war on drugs. eliminate cash bail. We have to stop the school to prison pipeline, where schools are now just like communities. Why? Because they have so-called school resource officers in those buildings that treat offenses that were once just a school violation, actually are now treating it like a crime. And so we are part of an effort to cancel the contract of police officers in the school with the St. Louis Public Schools. So we don't know how that's going to go yet, but we know it's a start in the right direction, because if you have somebody, and you've seen the photos of a kindergartner being hauled out of a school in handcuffs, it's really ridiculous. So I'm going to key you in on the right side of this, the key components of cure violence, because most people heard that, you know, the CAPCR was the organization that actually did the research for almost a year, looking at cure violence, the model, and also looking at the implementation of that program throughout the country. And we realized that it was a health-based model, which really, you know, took our, resonated with us, because we already knew that crime is not necessarily all criminal activity, but a lot of it gets lumped in there, particularly those crimes of economics. So with cure violence, those were some issues and some components that really resonated with us. We brought it here, and unfortunately, as of this week, we did a mass resignation from the steering committee, because we felt like the city was playing games. In July, we had 53 homicides, and you know, we can't seem to get them to understand that the model itself has to be implemented just the way that it's supposed to, and any deviation is going to compromise the outcomes. And so we felt like we had no other choice. And so most of the community members that were on the Cure Violence Steering Committee have resigned in protest that we don't think the city is serious, and the fact that they're bringing in federal folks and not really letting the community be a part of problem solving, which is one of the key components of Cure Violence, we think will not get us to the public safety that we have been fighting so hard for. I'm going to, this is all about some of the models that we have, but I want to, you know, stop there by saying, one of the things that we've done with educating people about public safety is also about what police are supposed to do, what prosecutors are supposed to do. And sometimes they have been one-dimensional, particularly in the Black communities. For example, a prosecutor is looked at as a person only like locks people up, because, you know, historically that's what has been done. So we are trying to educate and also look at the ways that these offices have been expanding, particularly with, you know, prosecutors like Kim Gardner and Wesley Bell. And so I'm going to stop right now, because we are part of the growing effort of abolition of both police and prisons. And so in the meantime, we have to have something more humane, more effective. And that's the whole conversation about not just defunding the police, but what goes in its place.
Unmute, Ruth.
Thank you very much. Jamala Rogers has a wealth of experience here in the city and experience organizing, and she not only talks the talk, she has walked the walk. We're happy to have you share with us this evening. So we'll turn it over to you, Prosecutor Bell.
Right. First, I'm going to start the question of reimagining public safety by discussing what we know doesn't keep people safe. And keeping people safe doesn't require just locking people up and throwing away the key. We did that for a long time. State and federal prison populations exploded. More and more people were held in jail pre-trial, and people went to prison for increasingly longer terms. And that didn't make communities safer. During the heart of the tough on crime era, as they call it, we saw some of the highest rates of homicide and gun violence. In fact, tough on crime practices made communities less safe. We funneled all of our financial resources into policies that tore people apart and away from those things that actually build people up. And I want to take an opportunity now to thank Women's Voices for inviting me today, and also acknowledge Jamala Rogers, who's also, who just spoke, who I consider an advisor, someone who's been fighting this fight and making, as we talked about earlier, good trouble, as the late great John Lewis would say, for criminal justice reform long before it was a thing or a hashtag. And it's time that we dramatically flip the switch on how we think about community safety. We must invest in people, not prisons and profit. Investing in people means expanding services to those who struggle from substance use disorder or mental illness. It means providing trauma care and counselors to kids in every school, but especially kids in our under-resourced schools who come from families who lack the wealth to pay for counselors when needed. It means providing both mental health and medical services to victims of crime, both because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's one of the tried and true ways of preventing crime long-term. The tough on crime, war on drugs approach resulted in 83% recidivism rates across the nation. In Missouri, we have the fastest growing prison population for women. 75% of women are there for drug-related offenses. 76 of those held in local jails need both mental health and substance abuse treatment, and only 17% of people in jail are provided with drug treatment. This is a system that claims to be about public safety, but in reality has the opposite effect that makes us less safe. Some of the things our programs that have been spearheaded by our office, as well as in the city, we created a conviction incident review unit, which is a walled-off unit that reviews and litigates allegations of wrongful conviction and also investigates and prosecutes all cases involving public officials and police misconduct, including excessive use of force. We're in the process of dramatically increasing our services to crime victims. For example, and since the time I took office, we've worked hard to increase our diversion programs to off-ramp people with substance use disorders out of the criminal legal system, I should say, and into treatment. We created a community engagement unit for the first time in this office to connect with and be visible in our community. We hired the first MSWs, or social workers, to help connect victims and defendants, for that matter, to resources to deal with the trauma and help them from a holistic standpoint. So in addition to substance use treatment, mental health care, but also jobs and job training. We've reduced the jail population by close to 30% for nonviolent and low-level offenders that research strongly shows incarcerating these individuals only increases the likelihood that they're going to be back in a jail cell. So as Jamala indicated, we changed our cash bail policy on day one, and we're encouraged that the Missouri Supreme Court also is implementing new cash bail reforms across the state as well. Other things, however, require serious investments by city, state, and federal leaders. They must be willing to stand up against powerful corporate interests and actually invest in the things that build people up and keep communities safe. Now, as the country reckons with decades of flawed policies, is the moment for accountable, transparent leadership. So to answer the question, what is public safety from my perspective, indulge me in a short anecdote. People ask me all the time, how do I like this job? I've been in it for about 1.5 years, and honestly, it's a love-hate type of thing. And I can sum it up with one example. When I meet with a family and can give them the justice and closure that they want for the loved one they lost, it's the greatest job in the world. And when I can't, it's the worst. So in closing, as you all know, I had to make a call that was the most difficult one that I've ever had to make as an elected official. And it was much harder for that family to hear and process. It was also difficult for many in this community. When the daily protests subsided 6 years ago, the community's pain did not end. And I realized that by announcing the results of our office's investigation, results many didn't like, it opened up old wounds and invited more questions about one of the most painful and important moments in St. Louis County history. The truth is that in many ways, I would have rather avoided that moment, and some thought I should, but this matter was certainly not closed when my predecessor closed it. Certainly not with the family, and certainly not with many in this community. And in the end, I owed them total honesty, and this community complete transparency. No hiding, no playing politics, just the truth. That doesn't mean that everyone is happy with the decision. Honestly, I'm not happy with the decision, but leadership is about trust, trusting that leaders are making those hard decisions and telling the truth straight up, no matter the backlash and no matter the personal cost. Elected officials should not make decisions based on what's popular or about what makes a good soundbite or a good headline. They should make decisions based on what's right, even when it hurts. And that's how we build trust. And trust is the load-bearing foundation of a truly just criminal justice system. And it's how we achieve public safety. And it shouldn't be just about safety in certain zip codes or for the favored or the wealthy or politically connected. But when we reimagine public safety, it should be for everyone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prosecutor Bell. It is a tough job. It is a tough job, and we know how difficult it was for you to stand before the community and share that you were not able to prosecute Mr. Wilson. That was very difficult. Appreciate that. We do have some questions that are starting to come in. One question, this is for Jamala Rogers from Gail Wexler. She asks, how do you plan to work for the issues related to the Cure Violence initiative now that you've left the steering committee? If you could share a little bit more about the issues that CAPCR had with the way the city's implementing that. You shared that your disappointment with the federal officers being brought in. And her question was, how can the public help you with this?
So that's a good question, and I really appreciate it. Before I answer that, I wanted to tag on to what Wesley Bell talked about when he talked about the difficulty of this job. I'm in Kansas City now, and they just announced that they have a suspect in the killing of a 4-year-old that was sleeping in his bed at 22 a.m. in the morning, Legend Talafari. And there was a press conference that the prosecutor held today, and the parents were there. And one of the things that struck me from the mother, Sharon Powell, was that she said, this is the worst pain a parent could feel, the loss of my child. I'll never have him again. She said, I also have to think about there's 2 lives that have been destroyed here. And she was talking about the suspect. And that was purely from a mother's standpoint, because she had empathy about, he was 22 years old. His life is pretty much over. And so when we think about public safety and we think about what makes people safe, what happened to that young man that he's on a trajectory where he's shooting randomly in the middle of the night, unaware of the consequences? So, it goes back to really getting to the roots of crime. And the prosecutor here is going to have to prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law. And people are going to be railing for that to happen. But in terms of, where restorative justice comes in, I think that's what I heard in Ms. Powell's remarks about where do we want this to end, and how do we want to create a system of justice for all. And so it's a good segue to talk about Cure Violence, because the Project Legend was not the straw that broke the camel's back. But what we realized was that the city is hell-bent on bringing outsiders in to solve problems. And the Cure Violence model absolutely has to have the neighborhoods that have been targeted being part of the solution and transforming the way that they look at violence. In this country now, the way you resolve issues, and this is one of the big issues that Women's Voices has taken up, and that is the whole gun control piece, is you got a disagreement, you get out your gun and you shoot somebody. And one of the things that I said in the press conference earlier this week is we're going to have a situation where whoever wins is the one that had the biggest gun and the fastest bullet. That's not the kind of society I don't think we're trying to build. At least that's not what I'm working towards. And so for us, Cure Violence is rooted in the community. And I don't think city leaders ever saw that. They saw that as a pot of money, and it's a big pot of money. We were able to get $7 million for that program. And they basically see it as a slush fund to be given away. And so we felt like we could not be accountable to the community and still serve in that capacity if our voices were not going to be heard. So in many ways, we're still very much committed to the Cure Violence model. We are regrouping now to see what that would look like in real terms, particularly if people aren't going to actually follow the model. That's going to be an issue that we'll be looking at in the future. But I think for most people who are looking at how do they help in a situation like this, I think we have to look at what laws do we have on the book that's going to make it easier for people to abide by. We need to have services in the community when people have conflicts that they can't solve. What would that look like? I think for us, mainly creating a environment of justice and fairness, how whatever that means for where you live, or if you have part of a congregation. So, and we're going to be thinking about this more, and I hope it will be a little bit more concrete in the future. But I really appreciate that. So Cure Violence has been successful not only in the U.S., but they've taken it all over the world to war-torn areas. So it's no reason why it shouldn't work here, except that our city leaders are not committed to it. They rather do the tough on crime and bring in big guns and say, look, and it shouldn't be lost the fact that this is like 3 months before the election. So, so yeah, people are playing politics with people's lives.
Okay, thank you. Well, we have a question for Prosecutor Bell, and it's related to the treatment of Kim Gardner. It's a question from Terry Neese. And Terry, I apologize if I'm not saying your name correctly, but he asks how, if you are able to help in any way with the relentless attack on Miss Gardner, which has spilled over, I think, into the governor's special session. And so I would invite actually both of you to comment on the special session, where it falls short, what it might accomplish.
I would start by saying my sister Kim Gardner has all the protection she needed. The voters of St. Louis City came out and covered her with their protection, with a overwhelming win in the primary. And I think that is reiterating that voters, not only in St. Louis City, but as well as St. Louis County, recognize the need for change, positive change, reforming this justice system that has been so unjust for so many. And one thing that has been so encouraging in light of the tragedy of George Floyd more recently is that the change in the diversity of the protest. We saw people from all across the country, from all walks of life, saying enough is enough and joining this fight. It's always just been the Black problem. And that's how many Black people have felt about it. And this is the first time that, and I can't speak for everyone, but this is the first time that I felt that, no, this is an American problem. And in a strange way, felt more American than ever before, because you see so many people that are coming out and saying. So with respect to Kim, I will use my platform to fight that good fight. And as we've talked about, we released a press release condemning the actions by the governor and the attorney general and the guy in DC who should only be there for a few more months. But as she knows, we work together our policies mirror one another's because we believe in these same things. And we didn't create this reform movement, we joined it. And I think Kim, the voters of St. Louis, gave her that pat on the back to say, hey, we got you by coming out so strongly.
So just in terms of the special session, you know, when the governor, who has no, or I should say little knowledge of what's going on in St. Louis, and the man in the White House has even less, yet they are trying to change the way that prosecutors do their job. And this is very interesting because a lot of the things that people are saying that Kim Gardner shouldn't do, everybody has had that authority and power to do that. And now all of a sudden, because a Black woman is sitting in that chair, how dare you? I mean, I remember hearing those things when she went after Brighton early on in her office, and like, whoa, man, what are you doing? That's not a prosecutor's job. And in fact, it was the prosecutor's job. And so I think that this is all about putting Black people in their place, particularly women, and particularly Black women. There is the female prosecutor here in Kansas City also came out and condemning what, you know, the governor was trying to do. And I think that most progressive prosecutors will realize it's going to be a slippery slope if they allow certain things to happen because of one situation or a limited situation. Because next thing you know, that person is going to be sitting up there with no power to do much of anything, and especially if the police enforcement associations have anything to do with it. So this is another way that, you know, people can really make their voices heard. They need to be sending emails and calls to the governor's office saying, you know, we need to maintain full authority of the prosecutor for her to do her job and to do it well.
And if I could add to, if this whole bill and these events that we've seen with the guy in DC, the governor and the AG, this is just about political posturing. If it was about public safety, then there would be, as Jamala talked about, more investment in the resources that actually make people safe, better schools, more jobs, more job training, all those things that have been proven to reduce crime rates. But it's just political posturing, and for that reason, they should be ashamed.
One particularly concerning piece of the governor's plan is to certify children as young as 14 for additional crimes, so they would be tried as adults. I think that works against everything that child advocates have been working for, and we worked very hard to raise the juvenile age of jurisdiction to 18 a couple of years ago, and this seems like a particularly misguided step, and really is not helpful at all.
So Ruth, these people always talk about the American people, but time and time again, when our mandate doesn't match up with special interests, then that goes out the window. We had 3 months before that raise the age comes to fruition in 2021. We had both Kim Gardner, Wesley Bell, and a bunch of others publicly talk about what their offices would do as this came into being. And now we have a governor that's saying, I know what you all did, we're not counting that. In fact, we're gonna go back and add some more provisions as to when these kids can be certified. So again, this is the time when we need to tell the governor, hands off. We already been there, done that, and here's where we want to go. We're not trying to go backwards to the 50s and 40s. We're trying to go forward into the 21st century.
Thank you. Ellen Wentz has a question for Wesley Bell. She asks, what are your next goals? And is there something that we can do to help you?
So, and I appreciate that question because we are in the process of expanding our victim services. One thing that we learned is that victims, particularly in crimes that aren't prosecuted, and especially in cases involving police shootings, are not receiving any resources from prosecutors' offices across the country. And what we know is that individuals who are dealing with the loss of a loved one, whether that individual is charged, identified, prosecuted, are still dealing with trauma and all of those and all of that goes with losing a loved one. And so we are working on a rollout of expanding our resources for victims so that all victims receive those types of resources. And these are similar things that we are also offering in our diversion programs for defendants. And I even had a prosecutor, and there's a prosecutor who had been in the office for a while. No disrespect, but when I first came into office, she said, well, it sounds like everything we're doing is for defendants. And so I told her to look at the numbers and look at those so-called, just the victims that she's talking about. And a big portion of them also have had issues as far as being charged with offenses or have also been defendants. So when we look at this universe of people, oftentimes victims are defendants, and later on the same defendant is a victim and they still need help. And so regardless of where we catch them in their low point, why aren't we offering them the resources that actually address the root causes of crime and are significantly more likely to decrease them coming back to a jail cell? And so in addition to that, we're rolling out, we started our bail policies, and we're adding some enhancements to our bail policies. And there's several other things that we're doing. But yeah, and we do a lot of community engagement. And so anyone who's interested, please shoot us a message on our website, on social media, a phone call, an email, and let us know that you're interested. And we'd love to get you involved with not only things that we're doing directly, but indirectly with organizations like OBS and other and other grassroots organizations. So thank you for that question. You're on mute. I made that mistake so many times.
We have a very loud heating system or cooling system here, so I keep turning it off to make it quiet. So in the chat function, people are asking questions about whether we should be focusing our attention on the community or in Jefferson City. What would you say to those folks?
I think it's not an either or. We have to do it simultaneously. And right now, because there's a special session, and I heard one political analyst say that the governor is going to get something out of this, because otherwise he's going to be criticized for calling a special session that didn't result in anything. So he's determined to get some of the things that he wants. So in order for us to be able to function and implement some of the programs that we have going or poised to have going, his decisions are going to put a halt to that. And so now we have to pivot and get him straight and send him some messages so that we can continue going on the road of progress and justice. And so just for a moment, we're going to get him, just like for a moment, and we're going to get that other man on Pennsylvania Avenue in DC. So we have to be able to, I think, pivot when the time comes and be tactically nimble to respond to all of these attacks, because you can't do it all at one time, but you have to be able to do both.
And this is one of the few times that I'm going to correct Jamala Rogers, because it's few times, but the guy that we're going to get rid of does not live on Pennsylvania Avenue. He lives on Black Lives Matter Parkway. Just gotta, have to put that out there. And so
I stand corrected.
But I'm going to echo Jamala's sentiments. We got to do both. We got to fight on all different fronts in this battle. And this also ties into the previous conversation of what we need, and whatever you can do, there's something, there's a place in this fight for you. If social work is your thing, we need to connect people to these kind of resources. If policy work is your, if policy is your thing, we have so many organizations that are helping with policy. If cooking is your thing, we need people who need food. And so whatever your area of expertise or something that you're good at, there's a place for you on this front.
Thank you very much. Okay. There are also in the chat function, there are some specific suggestions about who to call in Jefferson City. Certainly, we want to target the governor, as Jamala Rogers pointed out. There was another suggestion by Tom Rich to call the Speaker of the House. And the House has actually taken apart the omnibus bill that the Senate passed and are considering them as separate bills. So I think that gives us a better chance to really hone in on the bills that we find particularly reprehensible and ill-intended, and really focus on those. So we hope you do that. And
Ruth, the other thing that does in the House is that you then can call your specific state rep and say, hey, I heard this is going on. Here's how I think you should be thinking about that. So yeah, if they actually are successful in pulling it apart, I think we have more of a chance of winning.
And we got to educate people, because what I've found is that even your conservative Republicans, when you educate them about the criminal justice system and how it affects them, some people listen to different arguments. Many of our conservative friends, they want to hear the budgetary argument. And here's the thing: allocating resources to diversion practices is cheaper. It's cheaper to give someone treatment than to incarcerate them. We save taxpayer dollars. We get them jobs. They're taxpayers now, and that's more money, and it helps people. And so I think not only we have to preach to the choir that when we know and press and keep the pressure on our elected officials in our districts, but also in those other districts, we need to educate them so that they will also push our Republican counterparts.
Absolutely. I think the financial argument is an easy one to make if you're looking at facts. Absolutely. Right. So we had another question about, and this is take us in a bit of a different direction, about school resource officers and the wisdom of having school resource officers. Do you think that's a good use of a police presence? Is that a good strategy?
I personally have been opposed to officers inside the schools since the very beginning. I see no role for them to play there. And here's the thing, the statistics show that most schools will have resource officers before they have a school counselor. Now, something is wrong with that picture. And if anybody knows a school counselor, particularly in the public school, you are assigned to 3, 4, 5 buildings. You're not even at the same building to develop relationships and deal with problems. But yet we have 3 or 4 school officers. So something is wrong with that picture. And so again, it's a question of how do you prioritize the budget? And if you're claiming that it's budgetary constraints, both for the city schools, then one way to do that is to free up those dollars and invest in some school nurses, some school psychologists, some school social workers, so that you don't have the opportunity to have to call a real police officer who really needs to be somewhere else, not inside of a school. It just creates a host of issues that for the most part, people don't even think about. They just think safety. But I can tell you, it's the kids don't feel safe necessarily. And certainly they sometimes see these same police officers that are harassing them on the street that they see in the school building. So I'm working real hard to get them out of the schools. And that's an issue that you can join us in. There's a coalition of groups that are working on that. And we hope that we are able to impact the superintendent as well as the school board around this issue.
And I'm gonna to Jamala's point, I think one of the things that I was advised a long time ago and I believe in is that your budgetary decisions reflect your values. And we know what kids need, and that is counseling. They need connection to resources. And even in our office, one thing that we didn't get extra budgetary money to create a conviction incident review unit. We took from different units, and we're already underfunded, but this was important. So we took from other units to create that unit. We didn't have a budget for a community engagement officer. We took from other places to create that. There was, when I came into office, one attorney who was part-time. That was the entire diversion program. And she had a full docket with homicides and serious crimes. So you can imagine how much time she actually was giving to diversion programs. Well, now we've expanded that. And so now we have 5 people working in our diversion program, and we didn't get any extra budget, but we understand that this is what our community needs. This is what the individuals in our community need. And so that's why we did it. And in our schools, we know what our kids need, and let's provide those resources, provide those things so we can change this whole narrative and this pipeline to prison.
You know, there are many religious folks that say not only does a budget reflect our priorities, but hold that a budget is a moral document. I think we need to take that seriously.
I'm going to steal that, Ruth, if you don't mind.
It's not original. So we have an anonymous question asking, are there any police departments that are models of what police departments should be and how that promote public safety?
That's an interesting question. One of the, a few of the slides that I zipped past was Richmond. But, you know, and when the deal comes down, because the culture of the police departments are so entrenched that even, you know, splashes of reform are generally overpowered, and that lasts just a short period of time. So when I think about, for example, that there's a consent decree in Ferguson, you know, most people don't believe much has changed. And if you recall, when Trump came into office, Jeff Sessions said that was not going to be a priority, following up on the police. So my point is that it is going to be temporary based on, you know, a police chief who's there or somebody that's heading up a particular division, and that's their personal vision. But when it comes to the intractable nature of racism, sexism, and homophobia in most of the police departments, the change is not going to be long lasting.
And that's the problem that we've seen.
So the answer to that is no, I don't know of a department that's a model department.
And that's the biggest part of the problem, is that you will see flashes in the pan where maybe an individual chief will come along looking for change, but just wait for the next mayor to come in, and now that chief is fired. And the problem is that what needs to change is the culture, top to bottom and bottom to top. And that's going to take some holistic, long-term change that is not just going to start internally in a department. It's going to have to start from outside pressures and from people, you know, going to vote and saying, these are the things that we want. And I agree, there's still a lot more that needs to be done in Ferguson, but the change that we did see came because people came out and voted. And we went from having one African-American to ever serve on the city council in one election to 3, to half the city council. And that was because people came out in record numbers. And so we got to keep that pressure going. We got to keep doing it. And because politicians have the data, they know who votes and who doesn't vote. They know what communities vote consistently and don't. And those are the communities that come out consistently are the communities that get the attention. And until recently, we saw North County get ignored for election cycle after election cycle. Then we came out in record numbers a few years ago, and now you hear every politician in this region say, hey, North County, we got to address North County, North City. That's because we came out. But rest assured, if we stop coming out, we'll go right back to the back burner. So yeah, it's going to take a culture change, but it's going to take us to make sure that we're out there voting every election, primary, local, dog catcher. We got to get out there and vote.
Absolutely, thank you. We're kind of nearing the end of our time, but I'd like to ask you one more question and kind of drill down into the concept of defunding the police. I've had lots of conversations about this, and people sometimes get very excited and want to know, well, if we don't have police, then when a robbery takes place in my house, who's going to show up when I call some number? Or if I have an accident, who's going to come and make a police report if there aren't any police? How would you? What can you say to to ease the anxiety of folks who are really struggling to figure this out?
So I just want to take the opportunity to say, at the same time, Women's Voices has their monthly meeting, so does the Coalition Against Police Crime. So even as we speak, they're doing having the civilian oversight report back to the community. But a couple of months ago, we had a session just on defunding the police, and we laid out what that means, what we think it means. But basically, as I said, for folks who are abolitionists and ultimately are trying to eliminate police, then that means that you have to put certain things in place. For the community that I live in, calling the police doesn't really mean anything. So for us, I mean, you may wait and police never come. And even if you have an accident, unless there's a bodily injury, they don't come to that. So the question then becomes, well, what do they do? I mean, really, we had somebody, Vitali, that talks about the end of policing. And he really like laid it out about what police actually do. And so when you think, okay, we pay them quite a nice little salary and they don't do much. But I think when you start looking at what do police respond to, a lot of it is things that, you know, are societal, you know, mental health issues, you know, personal conflict, domestic violence. Those are things that could be worked out by a community or a neighborhood. So when you start to look at what they actually are doing, and you see how dramatically some of those duties could be dispersed other places in a more humane way, because certainly if there's an officer who's not been trained, and I asked him to come and respond to help me with a son that's, you know, having a mental health breakdown, that's not going to be a good outcome. And we've seen it over and over again. So I think that the simplest answer is we are trying to get neighborhoods, communities to take on the human suffering aspect of why people are angry, why they create crimes. A lot of it is economics. So if you deal with a big bulk of that, then maybe there will be only policing for murders or for the really violent stuff. But I would think that over time, our communities can take on some of those issues themselves, if properly resourced.
And I'll start my answer by an original quote: "A budget is a moral document." I made that up. I just made that up. No,
hey, you're in trouble.
You know, and what it means to many also is that it's about reallocating resources, and there are so many things that, and I'll be fair, you know, there's a lot of things that society has put on police officers that they don't have the expertise, training, they're not qualified to do. Just like Jamala said, they are not social workers. And many people are struggling with trauma, they're struggling with substance use disorder, mental health issues, and you can't take a few classes, be CIT certified, and think that you're a social worker. And so the example that I use when we took resources from trial divisions in our office and created MSW positions and created community engagement positions. That is a way of defunding even prosecutors' offices by reallocating, not just about prosecution and sending people to jail, but preventative measures, proactive measures that keep people out, alternatives to incarceration. And that's the way I define defunding the police is listen, we need social workers embedded in police departments that can respond to calls that police have no business going to. You know, when a cat goes up a tree, why are we calling 911? That should be something else. And when I look at diversion and people struggling with substance use disorder, I'm gonna let you in on a secret. The whole goal of our diversion program is to prove that diversion should not be in the criminal justice system. We want to show positive outcomes to where at some point the legislature says, you know what, let's do like Portugal and move this out of the criminal justice system into the public health realm and spheres. And so it's not about completely just doing away with police. It's about reallocating resources in ways that actually work. If they're and we know that when a homicide is committed, we need law enforcement to come. We get that, but when someone is struggling with mental health, that's not officers aren't qualified for that, and that's what we're talking about.
Thank you very much. You know, I think both of your comments will help people understand that defunding the police means there still could be a role for law enforcement in serious cases, and to take a more common sense, humane approach to when things happen in communities. So we are at the end of our time. I again want to thank you both so much for taking the time to be with us, to share your passion, your knowledge, your hopes, and to give us some direction on how we can join you in trying to make a difference. I want to thank all the folks who have participated in this. We hope that you'll join us again in September for our program on voting, and our program in October, where we'll take a look at Amendment 3, which is an effort to undo the Clean Amendment and the campaign finance reforms and redistricting reforms that we passed overwhelmingly. And the legislature is trying to undo. So that's a very important topic. We hope you'll join us for that. We invite you to be a member of Women's Voices. We will keep you informed. We'll give you opportunities for action. You can join our Common Sense Gun Solutions Committee and join in our effort to distribute gun locks and educate people about gun violence as a health issue. Join our Racial Justice Committee, our Advocacy Committee. Racial justice is focusing on affordable housing right now, and we would love to have you join us. The more our strength is in numbers. So thank you very much again, everyone, and have a good evening. Be safe.
Thank you.
For having us.